Welcome to our first video in our three-part overhead pressing series. So this week we're going to talk about a few different shoulder things. We're going to talk about mechanics of an overhead press. We're going to talk about why it's so valuable and important to do a proper overhead press. And we're going to talk about some screening tools that you can use to know where to start in your overhead press and how to build your mobility there. Over these next few videos, we're going to be looking at how to build up that overhead press, build up your strength, so that by the end of all these videos, and you're going to watch all of them, right? You're going to be able to master the overhead press and know where to start to be safe, strong, and to keep moving forward on your fitness journey.
The muscles used in scapular rhythm would include your serratus anterior, posterior, your trapezius muscles, middle, lower, and upper to an extent, your lats, and the muscles of the rotator cuff. You'll also have to be using your core to stabilize your thoracic spine to your lumbar spine to avoid arcing and get optimal shoulder movement. Your thoracic spine is the middle portion of your spine that extends from T1 to T12. That would approximately be from about the base of my neck to just below the middle of my back. This region's actually super mobile, so when people try to reach overhead, they do this. Your lumbar spine is the lowest portion of your spine and only has 5 segments, which extend from where your T-spine ends to where your sacrum starts. So why do we like overhead press? An overhead reach is one of the many actions our shoulder is capable of. Our shoulder is actually the most mobile joint in our entire body, but this comes with a little bit of a payoff. We have less stability in this joint because it's more mobile. But overhead reaching is one of the most important parts of being a human. Think of how often you go and reach overhead to grab something. Think of how many times you've opened your cabinet to grab a glass. Think of how many times you've tried to grab an apple from a tree, or you've tried to lift your kids over your head to throw them around. These are all part of being a human. So why do we want to optimize overhead reaching? Because if you don't keep an overhead reach, a strong overhead reach, you're going to lose it. If you don't use it, you lose it. So we want to train that action to avoid any further neck problems. Optimize thoracic extension, which is the upper back movement that we have, and keep strength in that shoulder so that you can keep using it for your entire lifespan. Another reason why we love overhead press so much is because a lot of people try to reach overhead and overuse their upper traps. This can cause a lot of neck tension and discomfort. Without proper activation of the lower trapezius, people tend to have difficulty with that overhead reaching, causing neck pain. We can also see often frozen shoulder and shoulder impingements. This is from overusing the upper portion of our shoulder in order to reach overhead versus using the lower part of our trapezius to help stabilize that shoulder. What we want to try to remember is that a direct line from our hand is actually not going to come to up here. It's going to come across to the opposite hip. So we want to create force from our hand to our hip in order to have a proper overhead reach. So you might be wondering if shoulder press or overhead press is for you. The best way to find out is through our self-screening tool, which I'm going to run through right now for you. The first part of the self-screening portion is, can you reach overhead? What we want to avoid is our rib cage flaring and our back arcing. So when I reach overhead, if I'm reaching like this to attain an overhead position, I'm actually using my spine to help me get there by tilting backwards. So we want to keep that rib cage down, and we want to make sure that we're not booty popping and pull everything tight together and reach overhead. That's our first step. A part of shoulder flexion in order to get overhead is healthy internal and external rotation, because as our arm goes up, it will actually rotate at the same time at the humeral head. So if you don't have internal and external rotation to about 180 degrees total, then this might be a challenge for you. So if you want to test, squeeze down on that shoulder blade and make sure that your scapula is not helping you with this movement. And can you go about 180 degrees with that shoulder without popping forward or popping back? So this side's harder for me. You might notice that I'm close to 180 degrees, but maybe not quite. Other side, same thing. Ooh, even less. Might have a harder time on this side. Another really good way to find out if you can reach overhead without any compensation patterns is place your back up against a wall. Your feet will be about 1 foot away from the base of the wall. We want to contract our abdomen into the wall, so I'm making full contact. There should be no place for me to be able to place my hand in the small of my back. From here, holding that position, I'll try to reach overhead. You'll notice that I actually have to get a little wider in order to get there. So when I started, if I go at full flexion, it's quite hard. This is why most people don't overhead press in this position. If I go a touch wider, instantly easier. So going a little bit wider in your overhead press, as long as you're compacted and you can control it, is actually helpful. And again, I still haven't moved my back off of this wall here. The main points of contact when my back is up against the wall is my head, my upper back, my tailbone, and my butt. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure that you try out our screening tool and tune in next week for more content on overhead press.
So make sure you like, share, subscribe, and click the bell icon for watching more of our YouTube stuff. Then you can follow us on social media on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Then you can also catch us on Patreon, where you can get a lot more from these videos than just these videos. So thank you.